Let's unpack this layer by layer, using data points you won't find in press briefings. Donald Trump's relentless imposition of tariffs, 25% on Canada and Mexico, 10% on China, and threats looming over Europe, isn't just a trade policy. It's a political Rorschach test, revealing starkly different interpretations depending on who you ask. To his base, it's a muscular defense of American workers. To economists, it's a self-inflicted wound. To historians, it's a revival of 19th century protectionism with 21st century consequences. But beneath the surface, there's a darker, more calculated logic driving this tariff spree, one that intertwines electoral strategy, ideological warfare, and a radical reimagining of global power structures. Let's unpack this layer by layer, using data points you won't find in press briefings. Trump's latest tariffs against Canada and Mexico came with a novel justification: combating fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration. He claims 25% duties will pressure these nations to secure their borders. But DEA data shows only 2% of U.S. fentanyl seizures originate from Canada, a country with stricter pharmaceutical controls than the U.S., while 90% enters through official ports of entry, primarily from China via Mexico. This disconnect reveals the tariff's true engine: nostalgia for 1920s-style economic nationalism. By invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, a Cold War-era tool designed for crises like the 1979 Iranian hostage situation, Trump has weaponized trade policy as immigration deterrent, a precedent that could let future presidents impose tariffs over issues like climate change or LGBTQ rights abroad. This legal maneuver effectively bypasses Congress, concentrating unprecedented tariff authority in the executive branch. The three faces of Trump's tariff logic. Historically, U.S. tariffs served three purposes: revenue, 1,789 to 1,860; restriction, 1,865 to 1,934; and reciprocity, post-World War II. Trump's trying to do all three simultaneously, a feat economists compare to threading a needle with a sledgehammer. Revenue theater? The 25% tariff on $475 billion of Mexican goods would theoretically generate $118 billion annually. But here's the rub: 40% of Mexican imports are actually U.S.-made components shipped south for assembly. A Ford F-150 truck crossing the border 8 times during production would accumulate 200% in tariffs before reaching dealerships. This circular taxation explains why the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation estimates net federal revenue gain at just $23 billion, offset by $120 billion in lost income taxes from corporate profit declines. Restriction, reimagined. Modern supply chains defy traditional protectionism. When Trump slaps 25% tariffs on Canadian aluminum, he's not protecting U.S. smelters. Domestic production meets only 35% of demand. Instead, he's triggering a $6,000 price hike per American-made electric vehicle, EV, as Canada supplies 80% of U.S. aluminum sheet used in batteries. The real beneficiaries? Chinese firms like China Hongqiao, which increased aluminum exports to the U.S. by 300% during the 2018 to 2020 trade wars through Mexican transshipments. Reciprocity as retaliation. The administration claims tariffs force trading partners to negotiate fair deals. But leaked emails show Canada's dairy market concessions under USMCA 2020 already gave U.S. farmers 3.6% market share, the exact quota filled before the new tariffs. This suggests the real target isn't market access, but ideological signaling. By provoking Canada into retaliatory tariffs on Kentucky bourbon and Wisconsin dairy, Trump creates villains for his populist narrative, a page torn from Hugo Chavez's anti-imperialist playbook, repurposed for MAGA. Beneath the economic surface, Trump's tariffs function as a sophisticated voter targeting machine. Consider the 10% tariff on Canadian oil, a seemingly odd exception to the 25% rate. Canada supplies 60% of U.S. crude imports, with 98% flowing to refineries in Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. These red states account for 57 electoral votes. By softening the blow to energy interests, ExxonMobil donated $1.7 million to Trump's 2024 campaign. While hammering blue state industries like Michigan's auto sector, the tariffs surgically pressure Democratic strongholds. The numbers bear this out. Michigan, 37% of auto parts come from Canada. Tariffs could idle 45,000 UAW jobs, mostly in counties that flipped from Trump to Biden in 2020. California, 25% tariffs on Mexican avocados may spike prices 18%, alienating Latino voters in swing districts like California, 22, Salinas. Pennsylvania, Canadian steel tariffs threaten 12,000 union jobs, but the state's fracking industry gets cheaper Canadian sand, exempted from tariffs. This isn't policy, it's politicide. The China paradox. Tariffs as reverse onshoring. While Trump's 10% China tariffs dominate headlines, the fine print reveals an inversion of decoupling. To avoid tariffs, Chinese firms are establishing phantom factories in Tijuana and Windsor, shell operations that add minimal value before exporting to the U.S. as Mexican or Canadian goods. Mexico's IMEX program, which allows foreign companies to operate tax-free near the border, has seen Chinese registrations jump 440% since 2022. The kicker? Under USMCA rules, these goods need only 55% North American content to qualify for tariff exemptions. Beijing thus gets backdoor access to U.S. markets, while Trump claims victory for reducing reliance on China. It's economic judo, using America's trade deals against itself. The psychological playbook, tariffs as collective punishment beyond economics. Trump's tariffs weaponize humiliation. By threatening Europe with duties over NATO spending, he's not just seeking money, he's demanding public subservience. The 25% tariff on Canadian maple syrup, $368 million industry, serves no fiscal purpose. It's 0.007% of bilateral trade, but forces Trudeau into a lose-lose choice: capitulate or explain soaring pancake prices to voters. Similarly, the 10% tariff on Chinese rare earths, of which China controls 90% global production, isn't about protecting U.S. miners. There are none. It's a dare. Make electric vehicles without neodymium, America. This approach mirrors the madman theory of Nixon-era foreign policy, convincing adversaries you're irrational enough to burn the house down. But there's a twist. Trump applies it domestically. By creating visible pain points, higher car prices, pricier beer, then blaming Trudeau or Xi, he casts himself as the protector against external villains. It's political jujitsu. Transform your own policy's collateral damage into opposition weakness. The feedback loop? Tariffs as media currency. Every tariff announcement generates $42 million in free media coverage for Trump, equivalent to running a Super Bowl ad every 10 days. The 24-hour news cycle's addiction to conflict ensures his threats dominate headlines, drowning out opponents' messaging. But there's a darker algorithmic genius at work. Social media platforms prioritize emotionally charged content. Tariffs, with their winners, protected industries, and losers, consumers, create perfect engagement bait. An internal meta study found Trump's tariff posts generate 18 times more shares than infrastructure bills. This isn't accidental. The tariffs' inherent complexity, most voters can't explain how they work, makes them ideal for meme-ification. Think Tariff Man merchandise or viral videos of lumber prices. By reducing multilateral trade to binary nationalism, Trump feeds the outrage machine that fuels his movement. The legacy play, tariffs as constitutional stress test. Legal scholars warn Trump's use of IEPA for tariffs creates a presidential dictatorship over trade. The Constitution grants Congress sole authority to levy tariffs, Article 1, Section 8. But by declaring immigration a national emergency, Trump sidesteps this via EPA's Section 1702, which lets presidents block transactions with foreign persons during crises. The gambit? Provoke a Supreme Court showdown. With a 6-3 conservative majority, a ruling favoring expansive emergency powers could permanently shift trade authority to the executive. This isn't hypothetical. In Trump versus Hawaii 2018, the court upheld the Muslim travel ban under broad deference to national security claims. A similar ruling here would let future presidents impose tariffs over virtually any grievance, climate policies, abortion laws, LGBTQ rights, abroad. The global dominoes, how tariffs empower autocrats. While Trump frames tariffs as anti-China, they're inadvertently boosting Beijing's influence. As Canada and Mexico face U.S. duties, China's offering tariff-free access to its 1.4 billion consumers through the CPTPP trade bloc. Mexico's already redirecting 30% of displaced auto parts exports to China. Meanwhile, Putin, no fan of free trade, is exploiting the chaos to push ruble-based oil deals with India, bypassing dollar sanctions. The unlikeliest winner? Iran. U.S. tariffs on Canadian oil have forced refiners to seek alternatives. Venezuelan crude, under sanctions, is now reaching Texas via disguised shipments through Iran's fleet. Chainalysis data shows a 200% spike in crypto payments between Iranian and Texan oil traders since February 2025. The road ahead. Tariffs as Schrödinger's policy. Trump's tariffs exist in quantum superposition, both real and bluff. Their power derives from ambiguity. Will they escalate? Be repealed? This uncertainty freezes business investment. A 2025 National Association of Manufacturers survey shows 68% delaying capital projects due to trade fears. But there's method to the madness. By keeping markets guessing, Trump positions himself as the dealmaker who can turn off the pain. As I write this, three narratives are colliding. The populist myth, tariffs as sword and shield for the working class. The economic reality, a $1,200 annual tax on households via higher prices. The authoritarian playbook, concentrating uncheckable power in the executive. Which narrative wins depends not on spreadsheets, but our collective tolerance for pain as political theater. The tariffs aren't just about trade. They're stress testing democracy's immune system, and right now the fever is spiking.